Talk Radio.
Welcome to Song Talk Radio. This is the show with songwriters talking to other songwriters about the craft of songwriting. We share tips, tools, and techniques, and together we all become better at writing songs. I'm your host, Neil Modi, and with me, my co-host, Phil Emery. How are you, Phil?
I am doing fine, actually. It's been a very interesting day here in St. John's. We unexpectedly got a third cat that we found as a stray in a graveyard. So who would have thunk? We now have 3 cats.
Cemetery.
Yeah.
Fun times. Good for you. All right. And tonight we're happy to bring back our ex-co-host, Michael Proudfoot. How you doing, Mike?
Hey, guys. I'm doing well. I'm very happy to be back. It's nice to be here. And, I missed you guys and I missed the show. So I'm looking forward to it. I got to ask, Phil, what did you call the cat, Phil? Spooky? You found him in a graveyard.
We called her Sadie because she's a cute little kitten and very loving and gentle.
Okay. Well, I mean, you found a cat in the graveyard. You could have really run with that. That's all.
Yeah, exactly. Zombie cat.
She's too nice.
She didn't know it was a graveyard. She's a cat.
That's true.
Exactly.
That's a very human institution for a cat to be even aware.
That's true.
And it's a graveyard, not a cemetery?
Is there a difference?
There is. One, and I can't remember which. One is part of church grounds, and one is freestanding, so to speak.
Oh, okay.
Oh, okay. It's the freestanding one then.
Okay, I think that's a graveyard.
Okay, well, Michael Googles that. Please, listeners,
good to be back.
Let us know if you know what's the difference between a cemetery and a graveyard. We should have done this a Halloween episode a couple weeks ago.
That's true.
Send your comments or questions to @Songtalk Radio or definitions on Twitter, Facebook, or Instagram @Songtalk Radio or feedback @songtalk.ca, and we'll share your thoughts and feelings on the show. And please visit songtalk.ca to see the show post for this episode and to find links to resources and things we mention. And before we get to today's very special episode, we always like to get emails and we'd like to get comments on our website and on our really cool episode we did a few weeks ago, getting past writer's block with Susan Catania. If you haven't checked that one out, definitely check that one out. It was a really good thing. We talked a little bit off the beginning about writing songs in different modes, which, heads up, is going to be our songwriting challenge for 2023.
Yes.
And Susan had a couple of good resources and Spotify playlists that one of her colleagues from Berkeley even provided for songs written in different modes and things. And we got a comment from Paul on that episode, and he says, I keep coming back to this. One thing I have found is that modes are not difficult. We just get caught up in the intellectual idea. Here's a video that I found super helpful, and he linked to yet another YouTube video that goes over looking at modes from a theoretical point of view. And the more, I hit these things, the algorithm keeps sending me all these videos, of course, about modes. And I think the takeaway at this point now is that, yes, there are many, many different ways to look at modes, as there are in music theory in general. There's always 2 or 3 different ways of looking at the same thing. So, you don't want to get caught up in this is right or this is wrong way to look at it. The video that I shared on that episode was about one of my favorite YouTubers, David Bennett, who explained it in terms of darkness and brightness, and that made the most sense to me, given the knowledge that I had already built up about modes and the playing around, not really playing around with it, but things that I knew about modes already. So it in that context, it made the most sense to me. That video may not have made sense to everybody. You got to start somewhere, but there are tons of resources out there and tons of ways of looking at this stuff. So definitely get yourself primed, listeners, because the songwriting challenge is coming.
That's right.
I think, and we're going to be jumping into this in January. So, best to have a little preparation. I think a little homework, and there'll be a test in December.
Yes.
Graveyard.
What about the graveyard? Oh, graveyard. Okay.
Graveyard is the one that's with a church, and cemetery is not. Probably easy to remember because Pet Cemetery, there was no church near the Pet Cemetery in that Stephen case.
Fair enough.
Which is probably why all that happened.
Yeah.
Exactly. Without the positive influence of the church.
Church.
What do you think?
Probably the first time I've said that.
That's true.
all these heathen areas, of course, are going to go crazy. Right. Okay, and today, of course, is a very special day on Song Talk Radio. It is our 423 episode spectacular.
Happy anniversary, guys.
Also known as our 9-year anniversary, if you divide 423 by about 50 episodes per year.
9 years, wow.
9 years, hooray for us.
Yeah, it's a long time.
It's a long time.
Yeah.
2013, we started this this little project that's become Song Talk Radio, and yeah, we've been through a lot of changes and a lot of, I won't say ups and downs. It's been mostly ups, I think.
One of the fun things that I came across last couple of weeks was on Facebook. One of the memories that it sent out was the post I made when we did a demo at CJRU, which is the radio station at Metropolitan University, was called Ryerson Polytechnic.
Toronto University, yeah.
It says, just did a demo of Song Talk Radio. By God, I think we have a show.
Yeah.
I guess we do.
And you are.
Yeah, because we had to submit a little demo to the radio station. We just did a little quickie conversation about songwriting in 15 minutes and sent it off to them, and they were like, hey, great.
Started off as a half an hour show with 2 guests, and then was a half an hour show with 1 guest, and then morphed into 1 hour show. And now we're trying to get it back into a tighter formation, but it seems to wander to an hour more often than not.
There's no limits on the internet. That's why.
That's true.
Well, yeah. And because we're not tied into an hour slot at the radio station anymore, we're kind of free to do whatever. So yeah. All right. So, and today we're just really going to just look at the past year. And of course, this past year is, Michael, you were with us for a good portion of it, which is why we invited you back.
Thank you.
To see what reflections you had on the time that you were with us from 2021 into 2022.
Yeah, I went through to familiarize myself, or just to try to remember, because the year goes by so gosh darn quickly.
It does.
And there were a lot of good episodes, so I was trying to figure out how to choose one over the other. I think what I come up with is, as entertaining as the show is, it's also nice to have some kind of information or something that songwriters can pick up on. And so we had a couple of guests who I thought were quite good at imparting knowledge to the listeners and still being quite entertaining and fun guests. So that's mostly what I chose. And then I also picked something kind of that I learned when I was listening to one of the episode, or when I was taking part in one of the episodes. So maybe I don't know. Should we get into it, or where are we at now?
Well, want to talk about general impressions over the last year, what we liked, and what, things that we're excited about?
Well, I think this past year has been, it's been a little bit different in that we, especially with regards to our songwriting challenge, like we really pulled that songwriting challenge, milked it for all it was worth, and we got a lot of value out of it, because some of those conversations on the songwriting challenge episodes to me were like the most valuable, because we really dove deep on especially on listener songs and on our own songs, and really kind of pull the layers back on the songwriting process, and kind of got a little bit deeper, arguably deeper than we would even with some of our guests. So that was certainly a highlight for me. So some of my favorite people of all time came back this year: Jacob Moon, Gilbert Neal, and I've totally made I became a new fan of Susan Catania, who's been on our show a few times. She's been definitely a highlight. Has come back as a co-host a couple of times, and as well her own episode to start with. Really, really deep knowledge, and just a lovely person overall. And I became a new fan of Terry Penny, for example, and Alicia Toner, especially, was one of the episodes that became a fan of her music as well. So it's a lot of great value for me.
I thought I was very happy with the songwriting challenge. It's a lot of fun, and I think everyone got a lot of value from it. So I would definitely like to do more of that. I think that's something that we should do more of, because I think it does push people into having a deadline, which is an important thing to have. Otherwise, stuff never actually gets done. And having a deadline does make you actually try to get something in on time. And I think we just learned so much from it. So I think it's the songwriting challenge definitely did it for me, I think.
Mm-hmm. How about for you, Mike? Have you continued to listen off and on since you've left us?
Off and on, yeah. I think, though, the songwriting challenge, because it took place over a long period of time, it was sort of a real-time exercise in songwriting and feedback and progression. So I thought it was interesting listening to, both your songs as how they changed, because we revisited them as well, and also some of the submissions. People would, send in a song, and then maybe a week or 2 or 3 later, go, wait, I've updated it, and they would also, kind of revisit their songs. So I thought that that was probably and because it went over a larger period of time than usual, I thought that was quite interesting.
Yeah, because deadline or no, we were late in getting our songs done in the first place.
And I'm glad that so many people, took part in it. I thought that was great.
Yeah, I was delighted by that. Yeah, it was amazing.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Excellent.
Yeah, and the fact that we got to actually talk to some publicity people, and I like when our shows can sort of deal with those kinds of information that would sort of help someone kind of get their career going. Even if they don't want to be a professional, they may, in fact, want to just get a little bit better than where they are now. And knowing about when to hire a publicist and what they do, I thought was really good. I enjoyed those episodes.
Yeah.
And when we totally geeked out about MIDI 2.0.
That was fun.
I'm a big tech guy, so I love that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And it was great. And just hearing about Mike Kent's big brain, and what a great job he has. He just kind of makes stuff.
Yeah. That's very cool. Yeah, and speaking of publicists, this year we've actually established a great relationship with that publicist you're talking about, with Carrie Zalek, who's actually been responsible for providing us with a lot of our guests. Like we get the PR announcements from her about guests that are just released something or have got something coming down the pipe, and we take a listen to their stuff and invite them on the show, and she handles booking them for us and everything. So she's been really amazing and professional. And certainly, and you're right, Phil, even if you're not professional or pursuing music as a career, you probably know somebody who is. So if you're listening to the podcast and you think that would be a good resource for somebody in your life that then certainly feel free to forward them that episode, because there was a lot of good information when Carrie was on the show, and answered a lot of really helpful questions about when you should engage with a publicist and when you shouldn't, and the kind of services she offers and the kind of things you should really look out for. And yeah, it was good. It's a good time.
Yeah, it was definitely one of my favorite episodes. When we were talking about choosing our favorites and maybe an excerpt, that was one of the ones that I chose, because I thought she was very entertaining and very knowledgeable, and brought in a lot of very useful advice for newcomers and for established artists. When you take on an artist or work with the artist, what is it that you need from them?
Great question. So when we decide to work with a client, we send them our asset list, which is one of the most important things they're going to get delivered from us. And we tell them exactly all of the things that we need in order to run a successful campaign. So just as a very brief example, we're going to ask for their bio if they have one. We're going to ask for photos that come with photography credit. We want to know who took those photos. We need the MP3. We need the WAV file. We want to know if you've been reviewed before or picked up in different types of media. And when, was it 15 years ago and that magazine doesn't exist anymore? Or was it 3 weeks ago in Exclaim, which is, hopefully I'm saying that right. That's something else that we always want to follow up if we know that a journalist has covered the client. We're going to ask for a quote. I want to know directly from you in 3 to 5 sentences what the song means. What does it mean to you? What do you want people to get out of it? So we're going to ask you for a bunch of things. It's all very clearly laid out. But we also, once we have everything and sort of rummage through our files that the clients give us, we book what we call a start date call to go over everything. And that is at the very beginning of our campaign. We actually call that harassment week, where we're just going back.
Okay, so that was Carrie Zellick talking.
That was from the episode, yeah.
Yeah, so again, so it was great to have her on the show, and it was a very useful, just like getting down to the actual things, like, very practical.
Yeah, a checklist.
Yeah, literally a checklist.
It's good to have some idea of where you need to go if you want to hire a publicity person, as opposed to going, gee, I think I need to hire someone. What do I do? That's always the toughest thing, I think.
Okay. So one of the shows that I really enjoyed was one of the ones that Susan, we mentioned a few minutes ago, Susan Catania co-hosted with me. We had a songwriter by the name of Terry Penny on the show, and he kind of... he was very much a wordsmith and very much a 3 chords and the truth kind of guy, but very genuine, very authentic, very down to earth person. And Susan being Susan, she got right into the mechanics of his song and started pointing out this type of rhyme that I'd never heard of before, called mosaic rhymes, where you rhyme a single word in one line, and then in another line you rhyme a group of words. So a group of words that rhymes with one word, right? And that's why it's a mosaic, because it's a grouping of things. And she noticed that, of course, in Terry's song, and here's the little conversation they had about it.
So the song that we're going to talk about today, there are so many things that I kind of want to address with you. First of all, because I've listened to some of your other songs as well, you're obviously a wordsmith. So tell me about how you construct the lyrics. Do you use a rhyming dictionary or anything like that? Because a lot of your rhymes are really, really interesting to me. So tell me how that comes about for you.
Never used a dictionary in my life or whatever. No, never.
No, it's okay. No, because I just wonder, because some of them are clever. They're kind of what we call mosaic rhymes. Mosaic rhymes are when you'll have like a word like appreciate, and you rhyme it with the quiche he ate. So you'll have like a construction of words together that make the same sound as another word. Is that something that you just picked up from listening to others? What that's a really distinctive thing to have in your songwriting.
Another bit for my list of, songwriting terminologies. You can just like mosaic rhymes. That's an interesting thing.
I've learned 2 things today. One, that there's a difference between a graveyard and a cemetery, and one about mosaic rhymes. So that's pretty good.
And the show's not even half over.
I know.
We barely got into it.
That's value. That's just some of the value.
Exactly. I when you'd mentioned what mosaic rhymes were, I'd not heard that term before, but I notice it a lot in rap music. And maybe because that's such a lyrically dense and focused musical form, but you see, you hear that a lot in rap.
Yeah. Well, it's certainly something, now that we're aware of it, now that I'm aware of it, I'll come to hear it more in songs. I'll be like, oh, pin that, you pick that out and be like, oh yeah, that was a mosaic rhyme.
Yes. Now we can label it and move on.
Yeah, you can label it, but it's also something you can try to use yourself, because it is kind of an interesting thing. It seems a little more advanced than, because every time I rhyme, it's always, a perfect kind of
a word for word kind of thing.
But it's always one word, and the same number of syllables and whatever. So it's kind of interesting to find yet another shading of how to expand that palette a little bit more.
That would be a fun challenge, actually. I have a song that has full of mosaic rhymes.
Hey, why not?
That would be a challenge. Like every, so I guess every 2 lines would be like a rhyme pair. Or you could do more, I suppose.
Yeah, I mean, she gave an example there, appreciate and the key she ate. So yeah, I mean, whatever kind of grouping you can come up with. I suppose if your song is rampant with them, it maybe becomes a little annoying, maybe, but
Yeah, I think it has to have a point. It can't just be for the sake of doing it. I think
that's just
would be an exercise.
Yeah, it's gotta fit a story somehow, I think.
Oh, sure. How about you, Mike? What is there another bit of the show that you remember?
He has been a guest several times, and he is great and knowledgeable. Mr. Eric Alper, as a good friend of the show, and I remember we had come across these alarming headlines that catalog music was outselling new music. And we thought, well, it may seem like that, but is it so? And we thought, well, let's get Mr. Alper on, because he knows lots about this sort of stuff, and see what his take on it was. And I found his take on it to be very interesting. I think it was back in 2015. That was the first time that catalog music outsold new music. And I've noticed from searching it that this happens periodically, but I think it's not quite as cut and dried as old music. People would rather listen to old music than new music. I think it has to do with a number of factors. But I am curious, is this a signal of some massive change? Does this mean that people aren't interested in new music? And I thought, well, how could we figure this out? And I thought, well, our friend Eric Alper would probably know, or at least have a number of suggestions and theories. So is this a reason to be alarmed?
I think if you're a new artist, yes. I think if you're a new artist that's not on TikTok, doubly yes. And I think that, it all depends on what side of the industry that you're on. If you are one of the dozen or so companies that have seemingly bought up every single classic song of the last 60 years to 30 years, you're really, really happy with this. This is why you were seeing hundreds of millions of dollars exchange hands to people like Bob Dylan or Sting, and Paul Simon is now right at this moment negotiating selling his catalog. We've seen Phil Collins get up there in terms of wanting to sell his catalog. So, the ability for that kind of music from say 1960 to 1990, that every generation until we all blow up to smithereens in some nuclear war are going to be listening to this music forever, because all these companies want their money back, and they want their investment back, and they want it fast. So we're going to hear Bob Dylan in television commercials. We're going to see Sting story in Broadway and on, soundtrack work. So I think if you're that side of the company and you thrive on catalogs, I think this is great news. I think if you're a brand new artist, you probably already know that nothing sticks these days. It's really hard for any book, any television show, any movie to really land in the center of America or North America or the world in terms of everybody all consuming the same thing at the same time for a long period of time. There will never be another album like Michael Jackson's Thriller or Nevermind by Nirvana. We're too scattered. And I think that these numbers that were revealed that catalog sales, meaning music that is more than 2 years older, are seemingly, demolishing the newer numbers in terms of new artists, in terms of new songs, I think is really scary. But it all depends on what side of the industry you're on.
Yeah, fascinating stuff.
Not terribly positive if you're a new artist, it seems.
No, certainly not. But I mean, is there good news for any new artist in terms of industry? I mean, yeah, and I think Eric's got a good handle on these things and a good insight into them, and he just kind of tells it like it is a lot of the time.
Yeah, I don't know. I think it's there may be fewer huge stars, but I do feel that there may be more artists who make an okay living, maybe not being huge stars, but actually have sort of a middle class income, just because you're able to have you have more control over your fame, whereas before it was in the hands of the labels and the industry and the media. So now it's a little bit different, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah, I think there's some. I wonder how much that's actually changed over the years, or just because, we are more engaged with these artists and I've become fans of them, and so I'm more aware of this kind of amazing middle ground of people who are not super famous, but they're, in my opinion, they're just as talented as anybody on the radio, if not more so. And they're producing great work, and I can go to see them at a show and actually shake their hand and and say hi to them, and support them, buy their merchandise, continue that kind of relationship with them. So I think it's something that I say to a lot of people when we start discussing things about career, is that there is this middle ground of between superstardom and amateurish thing, where a lot of the artists that I know, they're teaching on the side. They're doing workshops. They're doing songs for film and TV, or compositions or things like that for film and TV, in addition to just being a singer-songwriter as such. So it's really a myriad of things that they do, and they've managed to bang out a living out of that, and that's kudos to them.
Yeah, not too bad. Huh. One of the things I liked about our shows, and we had lots of great ones. Although I have to admit, some of the ones I was thinking about turned out to be from the year before, or even the year before, because things kind of blur.
Time goes by so quickly.
Yeah. It does.
It all blurs together.
But one of the things I loved about Susan's show was when she was here as a guest, she talked about modes and the fact that she wrote her song in Mixolydian. And I thought it was quite apparent that that it was very apparent what the modes sounded like. And I thought that was quite nice. But I just love the fact, the way we started off the conversation, because I love the way that she approached songwriting. We have so many people who write down their lyrics first, and then they, try to get a melody from the lyrics, and they build a song from that. And Susan works a little bit like I do, where she starts off with either the chorus or the main riff, and then works out from that. So this is Susan Cattaneo talking about her songwriting process.
And I loved what Phil was saying about like rewriting songs, because I'm all about that.
Okay. Well, following up on what Phil was saying, how do you start songs? Are you a lyrics first person or a music first person, or in between somewhere?
Well, I definitely think that I go for the words first, because for me, I kind of have to know the direction of the song. And so I usually start with the hook or the title of the song, and I will write from there. So I usually write the chorus first. And once I have the hook, then I start vocalizing it, because I'm a singer second, probably. And so I'll usually create the chorus first and then write the verses around it. I've done both, where I've done music first and then done the words, and I've done word first and done the music. And I find that probably the most authentic songs for me are when the words and the music are kind of occurring at the same time. So, like switching instruments, I play piano and guitar and kind of going back and forth between those. So, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely a great episode. If you haven't heard it, I urge you to go back and listen to it.
Yeah, definitely recommend that one. And Susan's she's very big on the prosody front. She knows in other people's songs and in her own songwriting, she's very conscious and keen of lining up music and lyrics so that they point in the same direction and there's a unified wholeness to the whole thing that just emanates quality.
It's true. Michael, is there another piece that you remember?
Well, yeah, it was you, Phil. It was all about you.
It always is me.
You kept saying and suggesting we should do a show on the Ruddles. We should do a show on the Ruddles, and Neil and I were like, yeah, okay, Phil, yeah, whatever, yeah. And then finally we did.
Which is what you said about everything I ever suggest.
But we really said it about that one. And I was like, okay, about a satire about the Beatles, and I wasn't sure how it would work, but it turned out to be really interesting to watch the film, and it turned out to be really interesting to talk about musical parodies, and in particular how they do musical parodies of the Beatles. Because, and we talked about it in the episode, unlike Weird Al, where he just takes a song and changes the lyrics and has a bit of fun with it. This went a bit deeper, where the songs themselves were kind of straight, but there was still comedy and there was a great deal of art to it. And in trying to figure out what made them work and what they didn't work, it really, I thought it took me down a road into examining the songs quite seriously. So it was a great idea of yours, Phil, if I didn't tell you that in the first place.
Made me think of now I haven't seen it, but I have heard the soundtrack of the Cirque du Soleil Vegas show Love, about this. Because one of the things they do in the Ruddles is they take very familiar Beatle riffs or sounds, but they put it in different songs. Like they'll take a familiar fill or break or something, but it isn't in the song that you think it's from, it's in a different one. Yeah. And there's a kind of a cut and paste or a remix to the Beatles' work in Love as well, which is very enjoyable. You get to hear the songs you know so well in a different context.
Yeah, that was a fun show.
Yeah, and then that was actually, I remember on that show, because I had the same kind of attitude, Mike, after Phil pushed us to do this, and I was like, Ruddle's fine. Okay, never seen it before. Don't want to judge, but whoop-de-doo, right? And then, but it was actually kind of funny to watch it. And then the thing that you had pointed out, Mike, on the episode about how it is actually interesting to see like the inversions and the pieces that they did take from the Beatles and the pieces that they invented for themselves and the kind of combination of those things. And it is kind of an interesting exercise. We had that one songwriter, I don't know if it was the year before, but that fellow who literally like wrote a Beatles song. Like it was his original song, but it was very, very, very Beatlesque. Like everyone writes something that's kind of Beatlesque, but this guy's song was really, really, and and he made a career out of that. And I was like,
mm-hmm.
It's circling back to what Eric Alper said about catalog music and how that there'll never be another Thriller album. And in some ways, you can't really do the Ruddles with many artists today because they're not that widely known, not in sort of a cultural kind of way, sort of modern, maybe Kanye West. But even I don't know his stuff all that well.
No, it isn't the same shared experience. The Beatles were this phenomenon that was musical phenomenon worldwide in a way that, even Elvis or other acts that were similarly famous, weren't. I mean, were famous for a type of music in the beginning, and then people stuck with them as their musical career advanced. So I think more than any other artists, people kind of listened to a progression and absorbed that and learned it even subconsciously, because that's what some of the jokes and the musical references in the Rutles are about, is about the different stages of it. Spinal Tap played with that later on when they, they did their advance from when they were, listening to the Flower People. They were the different stages of that band. But, that was a bit of an inside joke, and it was a comedy for musicians, I think, to a great degree. Whereas the Beatles were, playing it straight, and it was a very unique shared experience for a lot of people.
Spinal Tap became an actual band. Did the Rutles become an actual band, or was it just
actual touring band? I don't think so.
Okay, not the same degree as Spinal Tap did.
Yeah, I think they got together and did a couple of shows here and there, but they didn't actually go out and didn't actually go out and do an act.
Yeah. Spinal Tap did a couple of tours, right?
But which is tough, because what works well in a movie, because being completely incompetent on stage, because they weren't incompetent, they were kind of goofy. And I was tempted to see that, but I just sort of thought, I don't know if this would work all that well.
You talking about Spinal Tap or live Rutles?
Spinal Tap.
Yeah. Yeah, because without the context of the joke, I mean, they wrote silly songs, but the musicianship and the songwriting was competent.
Yeah.
It's fine.
Wasn't stellar.
Which is okay.
I still want to do an episode on Hard Day's Night, which I think changed the music industry fundamentally. So someday maybe Michael can join us for that.
The entire thing.
Really? Oh, it's an amazing film.
It is.
Seemed awfully goofy.
Well, when you think that they'd never acted before, and it was written for them and written for their persona. I mean, I think Richard Lester, I don't know if he wrote it, but he was the director, but he'd seen their tour and their press conference and thought, oh, if they can do that in like off the cuff, I can write a movie for them. And it was kind of, he figured out a way to expand all their personas in a way that they could still be themselves without being actors.
Right.
It changed the music industry, and I think the film industry almost single-handedly in a lot of ways. Because kind of the first
gave Elvis
video.
a film career.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Well, they realized, we can make a movie, and it doesn't have to be good. It just needs to have songs in it. Now, Hard Day's Night was good, unlike the other Beatle films, or not definitely as good. I think Help was okay.
It was all right.
But it was more, as the Beatles themselves admit, it was just an excuse to go to exotic locations. And then what was it? The one after that, Magical Mystery Tour, it was Paul's direction, and it was horrible. He admits it. They admit it. Yeah. But but the lesson was learned early on by people who want to make money from films, that, you just put some popular music in a film and it'll make money regardless of how crappy the film is. And then Elvis had a film career.
There you go.
There you go.
Now, Neil, you got some more reminiscence things?
When I was really looking over the shows and trying to pick out some interesting tidbits, it was really about things that I learned. So things that were kind of new to me, was hence the Mosaic Rhymes I'd never heard of before, and one of my favorite people that I met, that we all met over the course of the year, is Chad Shank, who he's from Minnesota. And he has his at-home songwriting YouTube channel and meetup group. And on this meetup group and on his YouTube channel, he does tons of like really long-form content, presentations, webinars, where he engages his audience in all these different exercises about writing your chorus, writing your pre-chorus, dealing with rhymes, all the stuff that we talk about on the podcast. He goes through a lot of these things, and he also has a series of like shorter videos where he just tackles one little topic. And he actually just completed an exercise in October just past, where he imposed a challenge upon himself to write, record, and release a 10-song album in a month, in 30 days. And he managed to pull it off throughout October. He wrote 10 songs, and he did a little YouTube on, his process through that, and how, like you were saying, having a deadline makes the biggest difference in the world, right? And we invited him on the show last January, and he was talking about this notion about when you have a similar rhyming pattern and a similar melody shape in, say, your verses or even your chorus, whatever, then that's kind of a prevalent thing in hit songs, and I haven't really started to listen for that quite yet in songs that I'm listening to, but now that I've pulled this little bit out, I think it's another one of those things on my list of things to listen for when I'm listening to, especially more poppy music, are the melody shapes and the rhymes lining up in a way. So here's Chad talking about it.
One of the things that I've noticed, and Berkeley talks about this as well, is a lot of times your rhyme scheme actually matches the melodic motif scheme within a song as well. So if you take like a song like Fire and Rain by James Taylor, the verses, the rhyme scheme matches what's happening in the melody. So a lot of times lines that sound the same melodically will rhyme lyrically. And I think that's something that a lot of songwriters don't pay attention to. But if you listen to a lot of hit songs, the lines that have the same melody have the same rhyme. And rhyme is really lyrical melody, right? Because it's a sonic and phonetic piece of your lyric that your listener connects with, and it creates not only prosody, but it also creates closure and momentum within your line as well. Because the closer you have your rhymes together, the faster that line seems to move.
Yeah, that was a really interesting point about it being a lyrical melody, or a lyrical melody, so to speak. Because we did a show a long time, not a long time ago, but a short while ago, Phil, on like what makes a song catchy. You remember that? I think we had Alistair on the show talking about what makes a song catchy. And then one of the things we pointed out on the show is that it's not just melody. Sometimes it's perfect rhyme after perfect rhyme after perfect rhyme can really propel a song forward and make it sound catchy.
Right.
So there is a very tight relationship there, and the way Chad explained it really brings that to the forefront about the relationship between lyric and rhyme and melody, and how it can really, strengthen a song, the craft of a song, if you're going for like a really catchy kind of thing.
Definitely, yeah. No, Chad's a smart cookie, and that's another great episode. So
yeah, for sure.
There's a lot of depth in our catalog. After 9 years, I wouldn't be surprised.
Yeah, I think so, eh?
I think you have one more, don't you?
I had one more. This one's a bit of a long one. This was a more recent show. Matt Zaddy, who I've been following for a few years, became a fan of a few years ago, is a singer-songwriter from Mississauga, Ontario, just outside Toronto. And when he came on the show, I think maybe we made the mistake of telling him, you can get as technical as you want. So he went deep onto this concept of secondary dominance, which I'd heard before. And to hear him explain it, he goes through a lot of stuff very quickly. And I had to listen to it a couple of times, but I finally kind of got what he's talking about. And it's like, when you think about a dominant cadence in your chord progression, it's always the 5 to the 1. It's always the G major to the C major. If you're in the key of C. So a secondary dominant is basically you're doing that same movement of 5 to 1, but the 1 isn't the one of the key you're in. The 1 is one of the other chords in your in the palette, right? So for example, if you're in the key of C and just for a moment, for like 2 lines of your verse, you want the 1 to become A minor instead of C, then you use the dominant chord for A minor, which is a D7, which is technically out of key, but it feels the same as doing your normal 5-1, but it's like a different 5-1. If that sort of makes sense.
Yeah, it's something that you have to kind of sit down with your instrument and kind of play around, and then you'll kind of understand it. But you need to actually
it's the sort of thing you really got to play around with. And I mean, the way he did it in his song was beautiful, and you can tell there's a melodic, harmonic sort of twist in the middle of his verse, and it ties together nicely and everything like that, but doesn't sound ordinary. So this is a bit of a longer clip, but this is him talking about that.
And I picked up my guitar, and the chord progression. When I hear this chord progression, it actually reminds me of that Elton John song, "Your Song," because it has that. It has the what do you call it? It has the dominant, but I played it on the third beat, so it feels like it's going to the relative minor when it goes to the sixth. Then, so the term for it is escaping me right now. It is no, it's like it ends up feeling like a 5-1 in the relative minor, but the word for it when you use a dominant in the place that isn't on the fifth, I forget. Just the term for it is escaping me right now.
I'm sure one of our listeners will let us know.
I'm sure somebody's screaming it right now.
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah. But I'm typing it into my search engine here because this is going to bother me. This whole song is going to bother me. It's like a dominant substitution where you can use the dominant in different places where it'll feel better. Like you'll have sometimes you'll be on the root and then you'll turn the root into like a dominant seventh chord, and you go to the fourth and it feels very natural because going from when you have that on the root with as a dominant seventh chord, it makes it feel like the five. And then when you're going to the four, it makes you feel like you're going to the root of if the four was the root.
Is that like an inverse harmony, or remember I told you about this, Phil, about that pyramid, the music theory iceberg video on YouTube, and you talked about negative harmony. Negative harmony was the term that he used for like a substituted cadence, or a substituted dominant to bring it back.
Yeah, the term itself is it's going to come to me at the middle of this call, and I'm just going to blurt it out. It's just I'm having a brain fart moment here, if you will.
Yeah. So you're talking about that, and you use that in the song that's coming up, I believe. Is that correct?
Yeah, in a dear friend. Like what I do is because normally, if you're playing diatonically, the third is a minor chord. Yeah. But I turn the third into a dominant seventh chord, and then when it goes to the sixth, that's what it would do. Because the sixth is the relative minor, you're changing the harmony slightly so that it makes it a little bit more interesting than just staying within the key.
What can you remember? What line that you did that on, so people can listen?
Trying not to take it off for granted and haven't yet.
Okay, so that part. So when we're listening to that, try to pay attention to that little bit of musical theory and see if you can identify it.
Right.
Basically, I'm doing an A7 chord where there should be an A minor chord.
Right.
Oh, okay.
And then when you go to the D minor, because the A7 to the D minor sounds like a 5-1 in the key of D minor. But it's not like there's a C sharp in F major. So.
Oh, cool.
So it's a very common musical device. Like if you took a song like "I'm Not the Only One" by Sam Smith, I think he does that in the key of E or F. And let's just take it as F, just so I can use it in the same example. It would be F, A7, D minor, B flat. So the third is normally, if you're going diatonically, minor, major, minor, minor, major, major, minor, diminished, or if you're doing, major 7, minor 7, minor 7, major 7, dominant 7th, minor 7th, half diminished. So the third is normally a minor chord or a minor 7 chord, depending on how you voice it. But if you do it as a dominant 7th chord, it goes very naturally to the 6th, because it feels like a 5-1 in the minor key.
Oh, cool.
In the relative minor.
So is that sort of a move? Does that come naturally to you? You're just strumming your guitar, or is that something you actually have to think about theoretically?
I don't think about it theoretically. I think about it musically. Right. There are a handful of ways that I would typically change key within a song. And that's one of the more common ways to do it. And it's really just a very quick thing. Like you can do it in multiple places where it can feel natural, the same way that you can use diminished chords as transitional chords if you want to do like some kind of a chromatic progression. I tend to listen to music which steps out of the key a lot. That's not to say that it's always necessary, but it's the same way of having a large vocabulary. You use the right word at the right time.
Fascinating stuff.
Yeah. It takes a couple of times going over that stuff. But trust me, folks, when we start talking about modes more in January, this is going to come back to haunt us. I have a feeling secondary dominants are going to play a part in there somehow.
I think when we do the song challenge, maybe we'll have someone come on and talk about modes and actually bring an instrument and actually play it as opposed to just talking.
Because I think that would be quite helpful to know what it sounds like.
Yeah. And even if you hear it, it's worthwhile going through the stuff and playing it on your own because it'll make more sense too, I think.
Yeah, and that's the only way it does make sense because a lot of these YouTube videos and stuff, they go through the theory and you can study the math, but until you hear it, it's not going to mean a lot.
Not much at all. But yeah, no, it's been a pretty great year, I think, and and next year is going to be shaping up to being another interesting one with the songwriting challenge. So
sure, it's going to be fun. Hope you're going to take part, Mike.
I think I shall. Though it sounds daunting. Modes and
that's the
dominance
idea.
And I don't know.
I promise you've done it already. You just didn't know it.
Yeah.
The trick here is doing it on purpose.
Yeah,
that's true.
Sure. And I do like the Song Talk challenges for pushing me into unfamiliar waters.
Mm-hmm.
That's true. Yeah, absolutely. No, it's going to be
what they're designed
the challenge. The challenge is the point.
The keyword challenge.
Exactly. And the songwriting, that part's important too.
Yeah.
I did come across a photo of us on Facebook Memories of, Mike and Neil, myself, and Vanessa at the radio station. And I really, really miss that. That was so much fun doing it in person and going out for beers afterwards with, the crew and the guest. It was great. It was so much fun. And in some ways, doing it over Zoom has opened up lots of possibilities. We have people from Australia and Europe and the States on the show. But it's something to be said about getting together and having a beer at the same time,
Well, yeah.
That's true.
Real life conversation.
Yeah.
Skipper.
Yeah, so I thought it's been a pretty great year so far, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah. And, best wishes, bon chance for year 10.
Yeah.
Nice. That's exciting.
It'll be the 10-year mark this time next year, Phil.
That's right. And I'll be another year older.
So this year, have people been giving you mugs and things? Because the 9th anniversary gift is pottery.
Oh, is it?
Oh, is it?
There you go. Something else you've learned, Phil. In case you didn't know that.
This has been incredible.
Song Talk Radio mugs.
Okay, so what I learned is the difference between cemetery, graveyard, and the 9th is pottery. What was the other one I learned?
Mosaic rhymes.
And mosaic rhymes.
And secondary dominance, if you didn't know about
secondary
that already.
Dominance. It's just
secondary dominance.
Been just a jam-packed show.
Packed full of songwriting goodness. Okay, that's. I think that is about the time because I'm hearing the band. Special thanks to Mike Proudfoot. Thanks for coming on and joining us today for a special episode, Mike. It's good to see you again.
Thank you for having me back. It was a lot of fun.
Thank you, Mike.
Awesome. Just feels like the old days.
Yeah. I'll have to start listening to the Mode show and other things, so I'll be ready for the Song Talk Challenge.
That's right. Do some homework. Exactly. And we want to hear from you, our beloved listeners. Please send us your comments, Twitter, Facebook, or Instagram to @SongTalkRadio, or send us an email, feedback@songtalk.ca. Be sure to check out our YouTube channel for live performance videos and full episodes. Subscribe today to the Song Talk Radio podcast on your favorite podcast provider. And you can find links to all the products, books, and web services we mentioned on the show on our resources page. And of course, wherever you are in the world, please join us online via Zoom at our next monthly Song Talk meetup. It's free to join on meetup.com and free to attend the meetup, bring a song and a lyric sheet, and get constructive feedback from other songwriters. Stop by songtalk.ca for the link. You can follow me at neilmodi.com. You can follow Phil
at philemery.ca.
And Mike, are you being followed these days?
No, I've dropped out of society.
Oh, no. I'm glad you could come here at least.
Yeah.
Thanks for listening, everybody. Be sure to stop by the website, songtalk.ca, to browse past shows and find out how you can be a guest. Thanks for tuning in. Happy 9th anniversary, guys, and keep on writing.
Happy anniversary, everyone. See you next year. Next show or something.